Welcome into another edition of the Stripe Show podcast. It is a Froggy Wednesday, and I'm telling you, there's no better guest than the guy we have on today. Yeah, we had a crazy U.S. Open week and so much to talk about, but I still want to go over what happened at the RBC Canadian Open. And so, you know what? Other than having Nick Taylor on, who won, who made the amazing putt, to be able to have Adam Hadwin, who kind of became a story, not even trying to be a story, just trying to support his friend Nick Taylor, really has been a big deal. But first, I would be absolutely remiss as a golf fan to not go over what just happened this past week at the U.S. Open. What a great tournament!
Yeah.
Real quick, Adam, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time. I know you've got a week off, a well-deserved week off after 2 crazy weeks in golf. But you played the U.S. Open. We could talk about that. But good to see Ricky up there again, playing well. 3 good days. Wheels appeared to come off a little bit on Sunday, but that takes nothing away from what Wyndham Clark was able to accomplish last week.
No, it was a great week. I know there's a lot of discussion about the golf course itself, and obviously the first 2 days with scores being as low as they were. It called into question kind of the venue and the U.S. Open or the USGA's choice, but I really love the golf course. I think that walking, and I understand it was a terrible walk for fans as well. They kind of bottlenecked, didn't get to a lot of areas of the golf course. A lot of the fairways were sort of, you could only be on one side of them. But from a player's perspective, from my personal perspective, I think it's one of the greatest pieces of property that a golf course has been on that I've been on. And I say that simply because you are in the middle of Beverly Hills and you have this like untouched landscape that, you know, was there 100 years ago when the club first started. And I thought it was a really fun golf course. I thought it tested sort of everything. Yes, the fairways were a little bit wider maybe than we're used to at traditional U.S. Opens, but it was extremely penal if you missed. There was a lot of wedges out of that Bermuda, and the green complexes were crazy. And then things just kind of kept getting firmer as the weeks went on, and you saw that reflected in the scores on the weekend. I mean, I think, what was it, 10 under was leading through 2 rounds, and then 10 under won. So it was a great tournament. I mean, it produced obviously an incredible champion in Wyndham, who has taken off these last 3-4 months. That win at Quail kind of probably, as much confidence as he had already, that probably skyrocketed into another level. And he just played solid golf. I mean, he did what he had to do, come down the stretch. I think Ricky or Rory would have been a very popular People's Champion, and either of them had a really good chance of winning. And it's not easy. And you get, like I said, you get a little bit off, even on a little bit wider of a fairway, or, I mean, because the greens were so firm, you had to be very exact going into the greens. Otherwise, you were going to have difficult 2-putts. And, you know, it can sneak up and get you, and at any point during the week. And it got him. It got Ricky anyways there on Sunday.
Was it too easy earlier in the week? And I use the term too easy very lightly, because listen, I mean, I'm talking about for you guys, for the caliber of players that were there. Was the golf course easier than you expected, I'll say, on Thursday and Friday?
Maybe, but I don't think that's a USGA problem. I think that's just a conditions problem, right? So you can set up the golf course in a way that will challenge players, but if you don't get any wind, which we didn't on Thursday, I played Thursday morning. We had marine layer and a slight drizzle. Nothing to take the umbrellas out, but it's still enough to keep the greens soft and from firming up.
Right.
And that marine layer never went away Thursday afternoon, and the winds never came. So, yeah, in that condition, you get a little bit wider fairways, and the greens are, I mean, they're still firm, but they're receptive. And I think the one thing that may be different from other U.S. Open golf courses is we had maybe a few more scoreable holes, right? So you had 1 and 8 par 5s that were both reachable if you hit good tee shots. You had 3 and 10 were both kind of flip wedges into the green. You had 6 that was a drivable par 4. 12, if you hit the fairway, was another wedge in. And then 15, a wedge par 3. So in that regard, you had probably 6 or 7 holes that you could, you play well, you're going to have legitimate looks at birdie.
Right.
And I feel like past U.S. Opens, that might be like 2 to 4 holes.
Right. Fair enough.
And then the other holes you just kind of buckle up and hang on. And so you combine all of that together, and you get a couple guys shooting 8 under. If you look at that morning wave, though, I mean, 2 guys shot 8 under, and the next closest score was 3 under. So it's not as if it was like everybody's shooting crazy numbers.
Right.
And then, as you go on, they let the golf course firm up a little bit. Marine layer hangs out Friday morning. I played Friday afternoon. It went away. The sun came out. The breeze picked up. It wasn't blowing crazy, but still 6 to 8 miles an hour. Made those fairways shrink just a little bit more. And all of a sudden, the average score was 3.5 over par. And, nobody was coming close. And then, we saw what happened on the weekend. Things firmed up even more. The sun was out. Breeze was up a little bit. And shooting even par 1 under was a great score. So I think that from a player's perspective, I think the USGA did a great job of setup. And I think they've done a great job of setup and letting sort of the conditions dictate the score than previous U.S. Opens. I mean, you can go back to Shinnecock, where players are complaining about losing the greens and losing the golf course. And, I think they did a good job that if you play well, good shots get rewarded. And that, to me, anything else is uncontrollable, really, at that point. You can't control what, if you're predicting 20-mile-an-hour winds and you only get 5, but you've set the golf course up for 20, scores are going to be lower.
Correct.
And so, I would much rather see a golf course that good shots get rewarded, bad shots get punished, rather than setting it up the opposite for, presenting us with a really hard golf course thinking conditions are going to be easy, getting the opposite, and the golf course being impossible, where good shots aren't even rewarded anymore.
Right. Which we've had happen before.
100%. No, 100%. And listen, it doesn't matter what tournament you're at, guys are going to complain. I mean, it doesn't, without fail. If the golf course is too easy, it's too easy. Look at the numbers. If the golf, if good shots aren't getting rewarded, then we'll complain that it's too difficult and it's not getting rewarded. So you're talking about the best players in the world that are there for a reason. And there's not much defense anymore in the world of golf when the conditions are easy. No wind, somewhat receptive greens. There's just no defense anymore. It doesn't matter if the course is 8,000 yards long.
Right.
I think you saw that at Erin Hills. What was that, 17 or 18? 17 maybe, where longest golf course in U.S. Open history. And they're setting scoring records because there was no wind and it had poured rain. So the golf course was soft.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that they're trying to make it so you guys have to hit the ball shorter with the ball rollback.
Right.
But then every time we turn around, they're trying to build golf courses longer, trying to make current golf courses longer, and make the U.S. Open longer. So which way are we going? We can't go both ways.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Obviously, I don't have a say. I don't have much of a say. I'll play whatever equipment they tell me I need to play. I do think they're catering to a very select group of individuals at this point. I mean, we're talking, they're basing numbers off of what, like 5 to 30 people in the entire world, that compete at our level and that kind of stuff. Obviously, the college kids coming out are getting longer and faster and stronger, and every year they do that. But it's still such a small, select group of individuals that they're basing everything off of. And if anything, they're going to make it harder for the rest of us. They're only increasing that divide. Right now, longer hitters will always have an advantage. And I think with a ball rollback, they would have even greater advantage.
I think so too.
Like
I think the ball rollback only benefits the guys that hit it super long. A guy that hits it average, there's no such thing as a quote short hitter. When you look at amateurs that play golf, nobody on the tour is a short hitter. There are guys that hit it shorter than the long hitters, but the average hitter is going to be penalized more than the guy who hits it 330.
I agree 100%. I also think that if they did roll the ball back, there's going to be certain courses that I can't go play. Torrey
Right.
Pines, I would legitimately not be able to play Torrey Pines at the current length. If I go there and I play an event there, I was talking about this to my caddy or somebody else the other day. Like, I'm going to have to play my absolute best golf to get into the top 15, top 20. Like, trying to sniff a win is, I'm going to have to play A+ game for 4 rounds straight, which is just very rare to happen on the PGA
Right.
Tour. But if they rolled the ball back, I'd have no chance.
Right. And see that's where they're going to eliminate, but it feels like what they think they're trying to do and what they're actually doing and accomplishing are two completely different things.
A little bit. I mean, if I had any input, what I would say is limit the driver size. Go back to a smaller driver size. Make mishits off the driver more punishing. So if a guy's hitting it solid off the center of the club face, he can still hit it 300 yards and he can still hit it straight. But if he hits it a little bit off the heel, it now spins more and it goes more offline. Guess what? Guys are going to have to swing slower because they're going to have to keep it in play. They're not going to be
Right.
swinging at 130, 35 miles an hour anymore because they know if they miss it, they're out of bounds.
Right. Right.
So that's where, like, I could see a small part of it being the ball and limiting it a little, but I do think some more of it has to be, the driver heads are just so forgiving that you could swing as hard as you can, miss hit it, and it still goes pretty straight. Like, I remember seeing a TaylorMade commercial, and this is bad because I'm sponsored by Callaway, but it was, Scotty and Tiger and all those guys,
Yeah, they were
and
trying to miss the face.
they're trying
Miss
to
the
miss
center.
I mean, he hit it so far off the high toe, and it literally, at least the shot tracker, anyways, was dead straight. I'm like, that there should be a 50-yard duck hook left that traveled 210 yards.
Right. Right.
So you reward, if you start to bring that in, rein that size in, make the sweet spot smaller, you reward the guys who hit it out of the center, and you can still get distance, right? Like, wasn't it somebody the other day, or month ago or whatever, maybe Tiger, he's like, look, I picked up my old persimmon, or one of my old clubs, and I still hit it 295 out of the center, but if I missed it, it went 245.
Right.
Things like that, I think, would have a bigger impact, because a guy like myself who swings it at, let's say, 114 on average, if I'm hitting the center, I can still hit it my 280, 285. But but somebody who's at 125, they can rein it back to 118 and hit the center all the time, and they still have an advantage.
Right. Right. That makes
But
sense. Speaking of Rory and TaylorMade, it's good to see Rory back up in the mix again. Hard to believe it's been 33 majors since Rory won a major. It really, when you really put that into perspective, all these years, it's been a while, and now it seems like the putting is what's holding him back. If you remember last year at the Open Championship, he had a chance multiple times, didn't make any putts, and then he didn't really, what I would consider, make any really long putts coming down the stretch on Sunday afternoon.
yeah, I mean, Rory's obviously one of the greatest talents of my generation, for sure, right? I mean, his work ethic, the way that he's handled the limelight and
Oh,
everything. Certainly one of the best players in the game. Winning's not easy. I mean, you hate to, like, I know he's missed his chances. I mean, you go back to that Open, Cam Smith, I didn't exactly give him much wiggle room either.
correct. Correct. And Wyndham didn't back up and make
No,
himself catchable. He did what
no,
he had to do.
100%. I mean, you're talking to U.S. Open, right, where level par is supposed to be important. I mean, exactly. Wyndham did everything that he needed to do. Was there a few opportunities for Rory to make a few putts on Sunday? Yeah, absolutely. He led the field, I think, tee to green, 16 greens on Sunday. So he certainly, from a ball striking perspective, put himself in a position to make a run, and to have a chance to win. But again, those greens, with the way that they were, it's so difficult to give yourself an uphill putt that you can be aggressive with.
Right.
And so you could be hitting good shots all day, but putting from 12, 15 feet above the hole that has, 2, 3 feet of break on it, ones
Right.
that more than likely you're playing with your buddies. You probably make a few more, but you also probably three putt a few more
Right.
because you're a little bit more aggressive.
Right.
And you're just trying to die and hit the high side. I mean, not exactly the putts you're gonna make all of the time, and throw in Sunday pressure and trying to you have to make them to try and catch Wyndham. Makes it
Right.
all that much harder. So
Yeah. Before we get into RBC and obviously tons of other things going on in the golf world, I've heard some people think that maybe the missed putt on Saturday night, that little putt Ricky missed on 18,
mm,
could have carried over into Sunday. And so, not that you're Ricky or you're in Ricky's head, but you've been in a position before where you've had a lead or you've won a PGA Tour event. Does something that happens late on a Saturday carry over to Sunday? Is that possible?
I mean, I think that you'd want to say no, right? You got enough time to kind of regroup, and at that point, I think it took him from what, one ahead to one to even
To
with
even
Wyndham.
point, he was tied for the lead with Wyndham.
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, you'd want to say no, but I can't imagine that at some point it wasn't in your mind potentially during the round. Um, if not for anything else, just the fact that it's an extra shot that you'd have to make up potentially.
Right.
Um, it's an extra shot that he had to play with the next day.
But definitely not the reason the
Um,
wheels came off on Sunday.
no, 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 100%. I don't think that putt on 18 was any reason of or any precursor, let's say, to what happened on Sunday. He had played really good golf for 3 days.
Yeah,
It's
which is
very,
hard.
very, very difficult to play great golf for 4 days straight.
Right.
And, like I say, you get a little bit off on a golf course like that, and, you miss an up and down early or something like that. Your ball striking is maybe not as great as it had been the first 3 days. And it kind of puts pressure on everything else. And, um, again, your final group, U.S. Open Sunday. Like, I
Right.
haven't been I haven't been in that position before, so
You've led a
um,
US Open after a round though.
I mean, yeah, it was a first round, so it's a little bit different than 3 rounds. But I played final round U.S. Open with Scotty last year, and watched him go like 3 under through 5 or 3 under through 6 or something stupid like that to tie the lead. Um, and I was doing my best to kind of just hang on.
Right.
And again, you don't have your best stuff, and you battle as best you can. And some days, unfortunately, a 74 or 75 is the best that you have. And it feels, if he starts the tournament with a 75 and then battles his way back to finish where he did, he's
Right.
probably, he's not dissatisfied with the week. He goes, "Oh yeah,
Right.
it was there, and I battled back." And then unfortunately, he played 3 solid rounds and ended with the 75, and so it's right there in front of you with everybody talking about it.
Right.
But still, I mean, you're top five in a major. It's still a pretty solid week,
Oh,
despite what took place on Sunday.
and considering where he's been at what
Yeah,
considering he had not qualified for some majors. I know losing the card was even coming into perspective. I mean, coming into a possibility. And so it's good. It really is good to see Ricky back and such a great US Open. And
hmm
Wyndham is a very deserving champion. Absolutely nothing to take away from what he was
no.
able to do. Um, let's go back 11 days. 11 days ago, you finish your round at the RBC. Do you start to leave, or do you look and see that Nick Taylor is in the running, and you therefore you're going to hang around, being Canadian, being Nick Taylor, you're playing your country's Open Championship. Do you start to leave, or did you hang around for on purpose?
No, I definitely hung around. I was telling somebody else this. It was kind of a perfect storm of everything, right? Obviously, Canadian Open. I had only teed off about an hour in front of Nick, so there wasn't a ton of time. Obviously, during the round of golf, I knew what he was doing and in the lead and all of that. And so, yeah, definitely going to hang around, go support him coming up 18, regardless of the outcome, what might take place. And yeah, to be there to support him. It had the potential, when I finished, to be just an amazing moment in Canadian golf, one of the greatest moments in Canadian golf, really. Um, and So yeah, I wasn't going to miss it.
No, it really was epic. And then never would have thought, that I think 18 on that day was playing the easiest hole in the golf course. And
Yeah.
so it was almost a little bit of a foregone conclusion that Fleetwood was going to birdie that hole and win the tournament. And then he hits an iron to be safe and blows it right, then hits the next shot on that downhill lie.
Yeah.
Almost chips it over the green. I mean, at that point, he's hanging on just to get into the playoff.
No, 100%. I mean, Nick bogeyed. I was watching on TV. Nick bogeyed 16 and bounced right back, birdieing 17, 18, right, to get in the clubhouse. And then I think shortly after Nick birdied 18, Tommy stuffs it in on 17 to tie him.
Correct.
And yeah, certainly at that point you're thinking, okay, well, we're going to need to have some fortune here.
Right.
Like you said, 18 it's kind of a funky hole. It's not a great finishing hole, but it certainly produced a lot of drama on the week. And yeah, so Nick went to, I think, hit a few balls. We were watching on TV. He obviously hit it in the rough off the tee. Like, okay, this is a good start if you're cheering for Nick at this point. Like we've got a chance here.
And then the second shot was mind-blowingly right.
Yeah, the second shot came off, and the immediate thought was Nick might win this outright at this point. Like, this is not going to be – I mean, he's going to do well to get down in 5 total here.
Right.
And so, obviously, he had a really nice putt there from 35 or 40 feet down the hill and tapped in. But, I mean, there was the excitement and – everything going on around that 18th green was it was an atmosphere I don't know if I've ever experienced anything in my life. I think obviously being Canadian adds to it. Only thing that I can ever think of is President's Cup, a couple of them that I've played in, and the first one we got absolutely doused in New York, but the atmosphere and stuff was awesome. But
then
yeah,
the playoff starts.
Yeah, and we were all out there, and
he stuffs it in that playoff. Like, you think it's over.
Oh yeah,
it's over.
Nick knocks it in, and Tommy's got what, like 20 feet or so, and you're like, okay, this could be it.
But the putt that he had, the fourth shot in final hole in regulation, I think that putt helped him on that putt.
Oh, most definitely. I think it was the same line, just a little bit shorter, right? So
he rolls that in, and then you're like, wait a second. Now the pressure's on Nick. He's got to make this little curler. Thankfully, he had that same line earlier when he made his putt on 18 in regulation to make birdie. But you think it's over when they hit their approaches, and then now we got to go to another hole.
Oh,
and it's like, and then it was unreal.
It kept going, and I think both of them kind of had their chances. Tommy had a pretty decent look on I think it was the third playoff hole when they switched over to number 9, the par 3. Kind of had an uphill and but yeah, just, I mean, to keep going, from a player's perspective, from my perspective, a little bit, I think I remember texting my wife. I said, man, I get like uneasy feelings as these things keep going, because it's normally, somebody wins it like the first couple holes. They'll make the nice putt or something like that. But as the playoffs keep going, usually it's like somebody loses it. And somebody hits a bad shot here or something. And then, so I don't know, like, just because of the enormity of the moment, I kind of almost got like a little sick feeling into my stomach. Like, God, you've seen such good golf and stuff, and they've had their chances. You don't want something to end on, a sour note, whether Nick wins on, Tommy making a mistake or not. And then it all unfolded.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like if Fleetwood had won, it would have been almost like when VJ won.
Oh yeah, definitely. It would have like, if he had especially if he had won on 18 there after everything that happened, I mean, it would have sucked the air out of that place.
Yeah, for sure. So we get there, and Nick's got a putt. What was it? 70 feet long, 72 feet long?
72 feet, I think. Yeah.
72-foot putt. He hits the most beautiful putt, perfect pace. And I mean, it could not have gone more center cut. It drops. You saw the look on Tommy's face. Tommy didn't even look to be, remember, he's never won a PGA Tour event in the States. It was a big win for him too. He's trying to win. Not that they were in the States, but he's never won a PGA Tour event. he even had a look of, you know what? That's poetic justice, the way it's supposed to end.
Yeah. I mean, what can you do? Like as a player in that situation, when somebody pulls off something like that, take away the fact that Nick is Canadian and it is the Canadian Open and nobody's won for 69 years and all of that. Take away that fact. If you're in a playoff and somebody pulls off something like that, I mean, there's not much you could do. You can't do anything but shake the guy's hand and say congratulations. I mean, that's
you didn't
incredible.
lose the tournament; he won.
No, absolutely, 100%. And I think as a player, if you're gonna lose, that's the best way that you can lose. Is that somebody else went out and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm taking it from you."
Right.
And
I don't want to miss a 3-footer to lose. I want him to make a 72-footer, and I'm like, hey man, you know what? You damn well deserve it.
Good on you. Yeah, and then obviously you add in Nick being Canadian Open, all the history, all of that kind of stuff, and it's Tommy's one of the nicest guys out there, and I'm sure that there was a large part of him that was extremely disappointed that it wasn't him, getting his first PGA Tour win, but I'm sure there was a part of him that was really happy for Nick in that moment.
100%. So now the good part. So you are standing greenside. They had shown you guys on the telecast a few times standing greenside, as they do. Like, hey, look at the support of the other players here. They want them to win. They were really doing a really good job of building it up. Now, nobody knew, what was coming with the 72-foot putt, because that was the most perfect ending.
Oh yeah.
So, are you holding the bottle of champagne, or do you go grab it?
No. So this had started at like the very first playoff hole, where tournament director kind of came out and said, "Hey, I got good news. Catering company that we use just, presented us with a few bottles of champagne. Would you guys, if Nick wins, would you guys want to go out and spray him?" He was talking to Corey and Mike and myself. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope he'd appreciate it. And I think Nick's agent was kind of standing beside us as well. So I'm like, hey, is that something do you think Nick would be okay with? And he goes, absolutely, just go for it. Okay. So the bottles were there during the first playoff hole and the second playoff hole because nobody really moved. And then kind of lost track a little bit as we had to walk over to 9 to watch and walk back to 18. But yeah, when that putt went in, obviously they showed my reaction. I mean, I was over the moon for him. And then I looked down, and I remember seeing a bottle there. So I was trying to unwrap it as quick as I could, trying not to pop the cork into somebody, and trying to figure out the best way to get it off. And I'm kind of sneaking around, and I actually ended up what I thought was kind of like a perfect moment, right? Once everything had kind of settled, Nick had celebrated. He had already shook Tommy's hand. He's kind of in the middle. People are coming up to him, but it's him and Dave, and they're having a hug, and none of this was planned. It just kind of worked out perfectly. And so I come around the corner, and all I'm thinking about is just spraying him and getting him as doused as possible. And, all of a sudden this guy comes around, Nick and Dave, and before I can even realize what's going on, I'm underneath him, and there's a cop. This is the only thing that I can remember from that moment. I don't remember what the security guard said. I don't remember if he said anything after. I do remember the cop kneeling beside me with the security guard on top of me, telling me, drop the bottle. That's what I remember. And I don't know why. It's probably because I fear authority. I'm like, yep, take it. I'm out. Swear I'm not doing anything wrong here. But within a second, there was 4 people over top of them saying, no, he's good. He's fine. He's not a threat. And so you can see in the video afterwards, right? They both kind of help me up. The cop kind of looks at me, hands me back the champagne bottle. I've got I don't remember, security guard and I have our arms around each other. So I'm sure he was saying something to me at that point. I didn't feel any hurt or anything. And, I think at that point I even turned to Nick was an afterthought at that point, right? He was so, engulfed by everything, all the reporters and everything. So I couldn't even get to him to give him a hug or anything, but I think I turned around and like looked at the crowd and started shaking the champagne bottle again, just like I don't know. It was such a wild moment. I mean, hopefully something I'm never part of again.
That guy can't. I'm sure you've seen the video
Oh
from
yeah.
all 72 angles. The best angle I've seen is from behind you.
Hmm.
He does like a swim move on
Oh
Nick
yeah.
and his caddy. It's like an NFL linebacker trying to sack Tom Brady. He
Oh yeah.
literally just squares you right up. And when did you see him? Like, did you see him come around, or was he in your face by the time you saw him?
I think he was in my face before I even saw him. I think like the euphoria of the moment was so big, and the adrenaline that was like running through me for Nick and for that moment in
Right.
Canadian golf and everything was there was so much going on that like I was oblivious to anything else happening. Like my one mission was to spray this guy with champagne.
I think you
And
got him a little bit before he got you, though.
I think so. And yeah, it's like I think I was so confused at what took place. Like again, thankfully not like I wasn't hurt. I didn't
Thankfully, you weren't hurt. You
yeah.
could have easily separated your shoulder there.
I mean, who knows in that instance, right? But thankfully I wasn't hurt. We could all take a look at all the video angles and all of that afterwards and have a good laugh. But yeah, during the moment itself, it was like I blacked out for that 10 or 15 seconds. I mean, I'm sure that I saw him coming, but I probably didn't even like recognize what was about to happen. Right? Like I didn't realize that. Hey, I'm a plain clothes, jeans, and a hoodie running onto the green towards the guy that just won.
Where
That
was your
they might
card?
yeah,
Your
I it
credentials?
was it was probably in my pocket.
Oh, okay.
That's where it was, right? So, but I mean, even in that situation, like even if I had have been wearing a credential,
Yeah,
I mean, is it like would that have been enough for somebody to
probably
like
not.
not, what I mean? I
Probably
think,
not.
yeah, I mean, in that situation, I'm sure that again, if Nick won, yeah, he did, but I'm sure they're being told, look, if this guy wins, you need to contain because
Right.
this is about to get bananas here. Like this has never happened for us. We don't even know what's going to happen, and
Right.
you need to make sure that people don't storm this green. And here I
Right.
am, like a plain closed hoodie wearing, jeans, storming the green, right? So, I certainly can't fault him for what he did. I wish it would have gone down slightly differently, but
Yeah.
certainly made for a great moment.
When did you talk to Nick after about it? How soon after was he able to know what happened?
I think he knew right away because you could see his caddy kind of running over at me. So he knew that I got tackled. Process wise, I think it was probably the next day. Um, he was being escorted out to do all his media and all of that stuff post win, and I was able to give him a hug and stuff there. But it was again very brief, and I mean, it really wasn't until like Tuesday of US Open week or something when we were, or maybe even Wednesday when we were going to play 9 holes together,
Right.
that we were actually able to like, I was actually able to get to him and tell him congratulations again and all of that kind of stuff. So,
I'm sure he
um,
thinks it's hilarious now that it's all said and done.
I'm, yeah, I think he does. I mean, I hope he does. Again, I mean, there was no obviously zero intent. I'm sure everybody knows that. Like zero intent of trying to create my own moment
Oh no,
in
for
in
sure
his
not. No,
moment.
I don't think anybody thinks that. Where's the
And so I
bottle?
think well, apparently they have it and they're going to stick it into the Canadian Golf Hall of Fame.
Okay.
But I'd like to I got to confirm that anyways.
There's going to be a picture along with that bottle
Oh yeah.
mid tackle. There's going to
Oh
be.
yeah. I'm gonna print one up and I'm gonna frame it and I'm gonna have him sign it for me. So
I saw you signed your shirt.
yeah.
I saw you sign the shirt, and so do you have the cork?
I got nothing.
You got nothing.
I got nothing but the jeans and the hoodie. Yeah.
That's hilarious. I tell you what, it really did make for a good moment. It's good to see him win that.
Yeah.
It could not have been a better, more scripted finish. You couldn't write a better ending to what happened,
N-
minus the tackle.
No, I don't disagree. And I think, with the live or the news about the PGA Tour and the PIF fund that was dropped on Tuesday of Canadian Open week. it's 2 years in a row the Canadian Open has had, let's call it live, PIF, Saudi news drop.
Yep.
Dustin Johnson left to go play the live event in London the week of the Canadian Open, he was an RBC ambassador, gave them like a day notice that he was leaving and taking off. And then, last year they got Rory winning with Corey being in the final group or second last group and going down to the end. And then this news dropping this year, again, it seemed like it was again going to be a stale, here we go again. But then
Right.
to have what happened, it was poetic justice and the tournament deserved it.
Speaking of the PGA Tour PIF merger, there's just so much to unpack. It's like, as a fan, as somebody on the tour, I was always team PGA Tour and didn't like where the money was coming from. I understand that there are businesses and business being done with the Saudis. I just didn't like the way it was done. So for a year or more, we've been trained as they're the bad guys, they're the bad guys.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, on the Tuesday of RBC Canadian Open week, it's, hey, kumbaya, we're all going to be one. In the words of Tom Watson in the open letter, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
It's and I'm just a fan. So as a guy who pledged his support to the PGA Tour, I have so many questions. Number one, is it true that nobody knew until the news came out? Did you find out like we found out on Twitter and news sources?
That I get 100%. I got a text from my wife that said, "What's the deal?" Because she saw I was driving to the course and she saw it on social media first. And so I went in, I checked my email, and sure enough, we had an email from Jay. And yeah, it was surprising in how quickly that it happened.
Right.
I'm not surprised that it happened. In that I kind of thought in some way, listen, what they're doing, what the Saudis are doing with their PIF fund is, I was actually reading a little thing about it the other day, is sort of they're diversifying away from oil being their main driver of economic activity.
Okay.
And they're using sport as a way to do that. Now, I'm sure you can debate the ethical areas around that.
Correct.
But this is, from what I've read, is one of the ways they're trying to do that. Now, so for me, it kind of just always seemed that eventually, at some point, especially because the live model was based around 40 to 50 of the best players in the world, and they didn't get that. They got, let's call it, 5 to 10 profile names that could be used to draw a crowd.
Right.
Probably another 15 to 20 guys that kind of fill the field, like myself at a PGA Tour event, and then 10 to 12 guys that nobody really cares about.
Correct.
And I say that as like no disrespect to anybody playing, because if you get to golf's highest level, you've done something extremely right. But that's just I have no problem calling myself a filler of the field, middle of the road player. It's just facts, right? Like, I'm going to go to certain locations at a PGA Tour event, and there might be 20 people because I'm Canadian that'll come out and follow me.
Right.
Doesn't matter where Rory goes, he's going to have 10,000 people that want to follow him. It's just just the way the world works. And so because they didn't get that, I don't know, I kind of always assumed that eventually something was going to happen between the two. They wanted to be involved in golf. They wanted to be like, that's their ultimate goal, I think, right? Is to be involved in the highest levels of golf. I'm sure they were seeing some success with live. I think it has been growing. I'm sure there is some merit behind the team stuff, but it probably wasn't, maybe they weren't forecasting it to be what they thought it was, let's say.
Right. I agree with that. I think they got some names they didn't think they'd get,
Right.
but they didn't get as many as they thought they would get once they got, I think maybe in a meeting, they said, there's probably not a very good chance we get DJ Brooks, Bryson, Phil, Sergio. But if we do, we'll probably get a ton of other guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't ever pan out. But you kind of thought this was something that could happen even before it did happen.
Yeah, and not I don't know in what capacity, and we still don't know in what capacity.
Right, that's my next question is.
Yeah, at this point right now, they have a quote framework for what could potentially happen, and nothing's official. I mean,
But
nothing's
we're a long way away, correct?
Oh my gosh, I don't think that. I mean, I think the guys, Jimmy Dunn and Ed Hurley and Jay and Yasir and these guys that put this together, I'd be reluctant to think that they even know exactly what this is going to look like. I think that between the two entities, they got together and both of them got to a point where they didn't see another option, I guess, right?
Right.
So
now, yesterday there was a player meeting. I guess Jimmy Dunn spoke yesterday. Have you heard anything about anything that came out of yesterday?
Unfortunately, no. Nothing that nobody else has read on Twitter or anything else. I haven't asked any players how it went or anything like that. Based on what I've heard, I've heard that it was a maybe a less emotional meeting than the one that took place in Canada.
So you were in the first one.
I actually wasn't even in the one in Canada either. I was out in the golf course doing a practice round.
Oh, you didn't even go.
No, and the reason, I'll be honest, the reasons that I might have gone to the one at Travelers just because it had been a week and kind of settled down, and maybe they'd have a little bit more for us. But most of the time, they don't have anything for us. They don't have any revelation thing that they're going to share with us. And to be honest, it's a bunch of guys yelling and complaining at the person holding the meeting.
Right.
And so it's nothing of use, let's say, for me. There's no real information leaving the meeting. I would have hoped that at yesterday's meeting that they would have actually had hey, this is what we're thinking. This is the direction we're thinking, some of that. I'm not even sure in this instance they would have had any of that just because there's so little concrete information about what's happening.
So at this point, we still have to get approval from the Department of Justice, correct?
I think I don't even know myself. I'll be honest with you.
And then
when they're looking into it, but
the headlines were LIV and the PGA Tour are merging.
Correct.
That's not the case, correct?
No, and I think because you have three entities at play here, right? You've got the PGA Tour.
Okay.
You've got PIF, which is the Saudi sovereign fund that they use to invest in everything.
Right.
So the PIF is invested that uses their oil money to diversify. So they're invested in Uber and Starbucks, I believe, and and a host of American companies, as well as the PIF owns the Newcastle soccer team. They just have invested a bunch of money in WWE, F1, so number of different things. So that's a completely separate entity on itself. And then LIV is its own separate organization, similar to the PGA Tour. The PIF, though, is the driving money, or has been the driving money, behind LIV. So that's probably where those two have sort of become interchangeable, let's say.
Okay.
But the framework deal, is between the PGA Tour and the PIF.
Okay. So with that being said, does that mean that LIV, the guys who have left to go to LIV, the LIV players, they will still be separate from the PGA Tour and whatever entity they're talking about setting up between the two?
Technically speaking, I believe so, yes. Again, I don't know specifics. But that's the way that I would interpret that. What I have read, again, I haven't been in either meeting. From what I have read and from what I have understood of people talking, is that because it is a separate entity, so the idea is to create a whole new for-profit enterprise that the PIF is investing. That's sort of what they're investing in. They're not
Correct.
necessarily investing in the not-for-profit PGA Tour. It's for the for-profit entity, which Jay will become, I think, CEO of, and he remains commissioner of the PGA Tour.
Okay.
But from what I've read is that there was this idea that at the end of the year, or as this framework continues, that Jay and the PGA Tour board will look to see how LIV and its assets and its players fit into the global game and where it might be going, and whether, like, that type of thing. And so there's a lot of there was a lot of speculation, especially early, like, well, LIV's done because Jay's just gonna get rid of it.
But that's not the case.
And then you have obviously a lot of talk recently. I mentioned earlier, like, it sounds like they're getting sponsors now. Like the Team Majestics popped up with a clothing, like a sponsor for their a patch on their clothing. So LIV players are coming out. Well, we have a 2024 schedule, and it's moving on like it's normal. So that's why I say, like, there's so many unknowns, and this is like a guess. I would say at some point, the game of golf will likely be maybe not necessarily under one roof per se, but I think that the goal of it is always to have the best players competing against the best players week in, week out. That's what's best for the fans.
Correct.
It's what's best for the game of golf itself. And so I'd have to imagine, as we move forward here within this framework or whatever happens, I mean, again, none of this might ever happen. This investment money coming over might never happen, and then they just stay with LIV. Who knows? The possibilities are really endless here. But
okay, so that's another question that I have, and before I lose that, I'll go ahead and give you that one, and I've got another one. Let's say it doesn't happen. Doesn't that put the PGA Tour in a really tough situation to now what keeps the guys that stayed from going?
I'd have to imagine that, like, the hardest part, I think, is that we both know, and I think most people, if they really thought of it, understands, like, money rules the world.
Yeah.
And you have a sovereign wealth fund that is invested into golf and wants to stay there,
and has a bottomless pit,
hundreds of billions of dollars. That I understand, they are business people. They do not want to lose money, but they probably will spend a little bit more money than is necessary if they believe there is a reward on the other side of it.
Right.
And so that is an extremely difficult thing for the PGA Tour to go up against.
Correct. And that's the thing, is nobody ever saw something like this coming in and happening. So while I know there's been a lot of disdain towards Jay, and I know that there's been talk about Jay being removed and Jay being replaced and all this, I'm not in a position to even say whether Jay handled this right or wrong. I don't like what's happening, but yet it felt like the tour was going to continue spending millions and millions of dollars, basically bringing a pea shooter to a cannonball fight. And they were, I mean, LIV was never going to stop. The legal battles could have gone on forever. And so I don't think anybody ever imagined something like this could happen. And so that's why it's a situation where I don't really know what could have been done different. People say, well, Jay handled it wrong. I don't really know that there was a right way to handle this ever.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And that's where, like, look, at the end of the day, I'm not an employee of the PGA Tour, but the PGA Tour is a $1.5 billion corporation, $1.5 billion entity. And at some point, you think of a normal company that I would just be sort of, let's not say a regular employee per se, but let's say, I don't know, middle management or something, like of a nationwide $1.5 billion company. I'm not going to know what's going to happen behind the CEO and what decisions are being made. Um, my chief issue that I've taken out of this whole thing is that he had a lot of time to prepare for Live. He had a lot of time to say, okay, if this happens, what direction do we go in? If this happens, if a bunch of players start shipping it and start leaving, where do we go? What do we do? Let's have a plan in place for when this happens. And it
Right.
just, as a player, it felt like he wasn't prepared. And again, I don't know everything that's gone on behind the scenes. I don't think any of us do.
Right.
I don't know, but it just even the decision making, even the players getting together behind his back, or whether he knew it or not, to get together 30 of them and say, "Hey, what do we do?" To me, that was in Delaware at the BMW Championship. So that was what, 3 months after the first Live event. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even something like that tells me that there was no direction, or
Right.
at least it appears that there was no direction, right? I
Right.
mean, that should have been happening 6 months before that first Live event. I mean, it was a threat, and I know they thought it was dead in the water, but there's too much cash over there to think
Right.
that it's dead in the water. I mean, you have to assume that nothing is dead in the water.
When there's
And
that much money tied to it, for sure.
100%. Like, they had, they had legitimate funding, and from people that weren't probably going to go away. And so that would be probably my chief complaint. I've I have nothing bad to say about Jay. I've really enjoyed our interactions over the years. I thought he's been very personable and all of that. It's just during this, everything was so reactive that um, it felt like it could have been better prepared for, given the time frame, and given that all it's not as if Liv just popped up literally one day and said, "All right, here's the event, here's who's coming, we're starting," and you go, "Holy crap, what just happened?" I mean,
Right.
they had a year to prepare for this.
Now, I've also heard that players who stayed, because that was the big question. There were guys that took the money, but then there were guys rumored like Hideki, who had, I've heard, 300 million offered to him and he stayed. To those guys, were you ever offered money, Adam? Were you ever contacted about going to Live?
I was not. I was never given an offer. I never sought it out. And again, that's probably what drives some of my opinions on this as well, because um, I wouldn't categorize myself as somebody who stayed loyal to the PGA Tour. Like, I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't have anything to go anywhere else
Right.
either. So,
Would you have gone
um,
given an offer?
no, probably not. I had discussed with my wife. I had talked with my agent if anything were to ever come. I truly believe that probably everybody has a number.
Hmm.
It's sad to say. I mean, some would say no. Some would say I disagree with you. Again, I believe that money sort of rules everything, and yeah, I'm sure that I could have seen myself going somewhere else for a certain price. I just knew that I would never get it
That
because
would have been.
I'm not worth that much, and I know that for a fact.
Now, what is this entity
But
that they're creating that they've said players who stayed would have a piece of? Have you heard anything about that?
no, I don't know. I have
Have
no
you
clue.
heard that?
I have heard that. Yeah, I've heard the same things, and um, but I have no idea. I mean, I think it's just simply a way to like,
I mean, there's got to be a way to reward
yeah,
guys that stayed, correct?
I think so. I think that's the attempt that they're going to make, to say, look, this wasn't all for nothing. Um, but I again, there's so few details about everything. I don't believe that if there was anybody, or yeah, if there was anybody that knew that this was going on, it was probably in some sort of ambiguous context of like, hey, we've had meetings. But I don't know if anybody actually truly knew that this framework was going to be announced when it was.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounded as if when it was announced, and now I think we know that's not the case, that these live guys, Brooks, Bryson, DJ, Phil, all of them. They were just going to walk back into the PGA Tour and just start playing golf again. That's not happening.
No.
And I think that if that did happen, there would be some type of revolt from players who stayed of like, hey, this can't happen.
I mean, I still think there'd probably be issues with a number of players if they were to ever come back. I think Jay was very adamant in that, since that first London event, that like he will do everything in his power to make sure these players do not play in the PGA Tour again. And he sat at many of meetings throughout that year and reiterated that point. And so
does that point still stand now?
I don't know. I think the landscape has changed in the last 6 months to a year.
I mean, you as a player, what is your feeling on guys just walking back in and playing again who took all that money?
As somebody who didn't I'd be a lot more upset if I turned money down.
Right.
And guys came back and I didn't necessarily, let's say, call it getting mine. Again, at some point, as I know I've had a pretty good career, right? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's great.
Right.
It's, considering other guys on the PGA Tour and stuff, it's been pretty good. And, at some point, I've got my opinions and everything, but like, I just want to play golf at the highest level, right? And so, yeah, I'd be a little disheartened to see if they came right back. Yeah, after everything that was said, I think it'd be a pretty big slap in the face for him to, for Jay to stand up for a year, then make a deal and they could come right back. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know. I don't think that they're going to be, I think there's going to be a time where we're all playing together again. I do. I do. Yeah, I don't know if that's next year. I don't know if that's 3 years from now. I don't know what it is, right? But like, there was talks of like making sure that these guys couldn't sign up for Q school and stuff prior, which I thought was just asinine. I mean, in fairness, like to me, if somebody left, took the money, and then let's say the idea was always that Liv wasn't going to make it and that they'd have to come back to the PGA Tour.
Right.
But to not let them even go through the basic steps of like, yeah, if you go through Q school, you get your card back, then why not? I mean, I haven't been as emotional, I don't think, about some of this. I understand that a lot of it's business and we don't know a lot that's going on, but I don't know. It all seems weird. But again, like I said, I kind of figured at some point some of this might happen anyways, but the fashion that it did and how quick that it did was a little surprising.
It's crazy to think that this is happening in the game of golf.
I
It
know.
really is. The most gentleman sport there is having the most unbelievable just back and forth. And I mean, a year from now, where's it going to be? Nobody truly knows.
I agree. I'm a just as interested spectator as you guys are, watching this all unfold, really. There's a lot to happen, and there's a lot that's kind of like you said. I'm not sure where we're going to be 6 months from now. We're not sure where Liv is going to be 6 months from now, and will they have a schedule for next year? Will they any of this stuff? I mean, I don't know. Will we have a full schedule next year, and what will everything look like? And this announcement of all these designated events and limited fields, and I mean, there's so much going on internally with just the PGA Tour itself and all of the changes, let alone all of the extra stuff on the outside.
Right. Speaking of designated events, and we're 75% of the way through the major season. Now, if you want to, I always selfishly living in Ponte Vedra consider the players to be one of the majors. So in that case, we're 4/5 of the way through the major season. I know you are taking this week off at the Travelers that starts tomorrow. Where will you play again as you prepare for the final major of the year, the Open Championship?
Currently not in the Open yet, so I'm gonna have to do some good things in these coming weeks to play my way in. But I'll be in Detroit at the Rocket Mortgage, and then I'll be at in Illinois, Moline, yeah, Moline for the John Deere.
Okay.
With the idea being that I'll play well enough. I think the only way now to get in is through world rankings, and so I'll have to climb very close to top 50 to get in.
Where are you now?
But I'm not sure after US Open last week, somewhere around 70.
Okay.
So it'll take a couple good weeks. Obviously, the fields, a good week at Travelers would have gone a long way, but it was just too much travel and back and forth between coasts and busy weeks. So the fields won't quite be as strong at Rocket Mortgage and Don Deere, but it's still you got to play good golf to win, regardless of the event on the PGA Tour. So a couple good weeks there.
Plus, I follow you on Twitter and on Instagram, and I follow your wife. I know you've got some house projects. That did you ever get the sprinklers finished? I know you were working on your own sprinklers not too long ago.
I had to call the experts in on that one. I couldn't get them hooked up. So yeah.
It's so, dude, some of that stuff is just like, really, and then you call an expert and they fix it in 2 minutes. And you're like, why couldn't I figure that out?
Yeah, I got into some of the wiring stuff and trying to rehook that up, and that's just, I got a pretty low pay grade when it comes to household chores, so that was way above mine.
It is. If you don't follow Adam and his wife on Instagram, you on Twitter, actually, you're missing out. She's as good of a follow as you are, no doubt.
I've heard from a lot of people. I'm sure if people start following her, it's a way better follow than me. She's a lot more funny and witty.
She is very opinionated and not afraid to share her opinion, which that's exactly what makes it so much fun. Though, appreciate you joining us, man. Appreciate you being so candid. Good luck at the Rocket Mortgage and at the John Deere. Hope to see you at the Open, and then of course before you know it, it's crazy how it all just goes so fast now. The Players was in March, then you got Masters. Then you got PGA, and you got US Open. The Open, before you know it, we'll be in the FedEx Cup playoffs. It really just, it moves so fast. And now this year we've got a real off season. Are you looking forward to an actual off season in golf?
We do, but if you don't finish high enough in the FedEx, you still got to play in the fall. The fall now, everything continues post playoffs, and that 125 number isn't set till the end of the fall. So, the idea being that I'm going to play well enough in the next, month or month and a half, 6 weeks, whatever it is left, to be in the top 50. That's kind of the number everybody's shooting for, because you get in that, then it becomes a true off season.
Right.
And you can take as much time as you want. I think those guys that make the playoffs, that 51 through 70 number, could treat it as much of an off season as they want, but their FedEx is going to kind of keep ticking, and they'll fall down the priority ranking list a little bit. But, the last couple of years, I've had 2 months off before I've started, so it's definitely felt a lot closer. And the idea of getting into the top 50 and potentially having 3 or 4 months off is really nice.
Something to play for.
Exactly, 100%.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate it, man. Good luck to you. Thanks for your candidness, and good luck moving forward, and good luck on the last quarter of the season we got ahead of us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate it, Adam.
Yeah, no problems at all.